So just like we've started in class with most of our projects, first thing we want to do with the rigging project is to actually create a new project for it. So if you remember, go to File and Project Window. This will create our directory now, that way we can name our scenes. We're not going to touch this obviously, but then up here we've got our name, Project Rigging, and where we want to locate it. So let's just call this one Full Body Rig, and let's deposit this on the desktop for now. There you go. So when we click Accept, that's our scene setup. And obviously then the next thing would be to actually drag our geometry in that we're going to use. In this case it's part of the rigging OBJ pack that we all picked up off the student directory. So drag it into our scene, and this should create our full body rig like this. Beautiful. Now we're almost ready to start rigging, but at the minute we are still able to interact with our geometry, which obviously when we're laying in very kind of orientation specific components like rigs, we want to not have this being selected. So we want to add this to our own layer, or it to its own layer. So up here inside your control box, you will have the display, render and anim. In display, make sure that our geometry is selected. I want to click this bottom fourth one here. This will assign whatever's been selected to its own layer, so we can make it visible and invisible, and then we can turn it to a template, which is uninteractable, or to a reference, which is a full rendered geometry but not interactable, which becomes very useful later on. So now that we've got this geometry in, this is step one. We need to do our incremental save. Kevin _01. Cool. So now that's not interactable, and we are able to move straight on with actually adding the initial stage, which is the actual skeleton of our rig. So just like we did in class, we have to remember that we want to have animation selected in this top menu selection option, and the animation tab in our shelf been selected. This will give us all our quick selects for all the different functions we're using, as well as the menu up top. So again, just like we've done in class, we're going to go through the same process we have done in class. This is just like a thing that you can come back to and work on while you're doing your final rig yourself. So with our leg, I always find that from the front you get a good idea of the leg shape, but from the side you get an idea of the actual bend in the leg, which is what we want to actually maintain for the IK to work properly, and for us to kind of pinpoint key areas of the rig, like the hips, the knees, the ankle, the toes and stuff. So upstairs, up in our selection box, click joint, and then we want to start adding our joints in. And remember, we want to go through the rotational point of any joint. So with your hips, you want to put your first joint in where the rotation of the hips are. So before we start, actually go to this button here. This will turn on show joints through geometry. I'll just show you that working in a second when we've laid in the joints. So letting in the first set of joints for the leg, it's in the hip and then to the knee, because usually the knee rotates from the front rather than the back. The back is where we contain all the hamstrings and cartilage. And then to the ankle, which remember in class we are calling the heel, because with this main skeletal joint group we have to name stuff over what it's actually controlling, and this will be controlling the heel. So but we place it in the ankle position, which is, I know, very confusing. And then we place another one down in the toes, and then one to toe tip. Beautiful. So going back into perspective mode, we should have this. with our joints laid out in the center of the world, because obviously we're looking from the orthographic view, so it's going to lay it in. It's going to lay all our components in the center of the world from that perspective. If we go to the front, we can now, using our translate tool, click on our top root, move that over, and now it's in an alright position here, but the rest of the rig is not aligned with the rest of our geometry, which is what we want. We could move it like this. I have snaps on it in a minute, but we can rotate it using the rotate tool. I don't like doing that because it's not using the you're messing with the actual rotation of the joint instead of just the orientation. So what I do, what I advise everyone to do, is go up here to the attributes editor, and with your joint selected you'll get this menu up here. We get transform attributes, and then we've got joint, and this is one we'll be manipulating quite a lot inside our rig setup, and it's joint orient, and this is what we're going to do to actually move the joints into the position that we want. So then this is the orientation that we want. We want to move this like so. You can see the leg there is moving. Now I'm moving the leg by holding control and then holding middle mouse down while I'm hovering over this this bottom Z axis box here, and then dragging inside the box, and just like that you can see that it moves, and we want to drag it to the right so that it lines up with the leg. And now my number here is -83.100. Yours might be a little bit different depending on whereabouts you've laid in your hip joint, but it should be somewhere around that number. Now the last one we do, orientation wise, is down here, and we can see that our foot is facing nice and straight in the rig, but our actual geometric foot, Kevin's foot here, is pointing slightly off. So if we were to rig the leg like this, and we go to apply our set driven keys for pivot and roll, the foot wouldn't move naturally, it'd move in an awkward, janky way. So we want to rotate this into the right position so the actual foot, these last two joints, are actually facing down the actual flow of the foot. And that's very simple to do. Selecting these two guys, this top guy, over the y-axis, because if you imagine a pole sticking down from the world there, and we're twisting it, it'll be twisting in the y-axis. So doing the same thing as we did with the hip joint, we want to control and middle mouse over this box and just rotate it to the left. Well, when I say rotate to the left, I mean scrub to the left using this box. Scrub to the left, kind of line it up with the middle toe. Mine is minus 10.9. Yours might be the same, hopefully. Good. So that is our leg on one side in the correct position. Now, just like with everything, and I've been trying to get this into people's heads quite a lot, we have to be very careful with our naming conventions for multiple reasons. We want to make sure that for us we can identify what joint is being parented to what, constrained or arcade. But inside a studio environment, if you were rigging a character and you then sent it off to another person who was not involved inside the rigging, but they still had to use the rig in some variety, or they had to go in and change something, or you have different rigs flying across the studio, which happens quite a lot, you need to make sure that everyone knows what rig is what points of rigs are what. You know, you're not going to have a foot control called a foot control and then another one is called a leg control, or a wrist control called a hand control on one. You need to make sure that your naming conventions are clear, are a convention that goes around the studio if you are in a studio environment, or if you just stick to your own naming conventions if you're doing this for yourself, so that you yourself know from rig to rig to rig exactly what is what. Cool. So, time to name those joints. And we can name our joints in the attributes editor here. It's perfectly fine doing that. I like doing it in the outliner though, which is in our left menu here. it's the third view button down, and you get this guy. I like doing it in this because I can see the whole cascade of joints, so I know I'm not naming a joint the wrong thing. So going from the hip, remember we need to say what side of the body this is on. So this is on his left, so we need to prefix everything with L underscore. And though I have been saying this is a hip joint, locally to the body this is a hip joint, but what it's actually going to be controlling is the thigh, the upper part of the leg. So we'll actually be calling this a thigh joint. And we always want to end a joint with joint, so that when our outliner gets nice and busy, we can see what a joint is, and what a control is, and what an IK is. We do have these little guys next to it, but sometimes they can get a little bit confusing to look at, because you get so much stuff on just in the outline that, you know, just having the joint there, you can just read that quicker than you can read the image. So the next one down the tree, I call the knee. You can call it calf if you want, but I would advise calling it a knee, just because. And then the joint in the ankle position, remember we're not calling this the ankle, this is the heel, because this is what's going to be controlling the heel when we add our control joints later on. Joint. And then this one, because this is situated around the toe knuckle area, so we're not going to call this toe knuckles because it's too big a name, but what this is going to be doing is controlling the toes. So we're going to want to call this toe. And then this one at the very end is at the tip of the toes. This will control, I'll just move that down a little bit. This will control how the foot pivots when we add our SDKs for moving the foot. When we go on our tiptoe, this is what the joint's going to be. This is what the geometry is going to be rolling around. So we want to. That's a toe tip. So we want to call that toe tip joint. And there you go. So that's our leg set up. We've got our name convention in place. Good. And then we want to get this guy over here. And obviously that's very simple. We've gone through it in class, but we'll do it again here. We want to go to skeleton, mirror joint option box, and my settings have already carried over, but I will go and reset the settings. So this is what you're probably going to get. Your mirror axis is probably going to be X, Y. Your mirror function is probably going to be behavior, and then you're going to be replacing these with nothing at the minute. Pardon me. So we want to change this to YZ, and then we want to change for such, because that's the orientate, that's the angles we're going to be flipping, mirroring against. And inside here, this is going to be replacing anything inside the outline, or the name will be replaced with something else. This function, you know, is in Word. We might have used it in the past when we were in high school, but we want to change the L's to R's. So in this top one, it's going to want to search for L, and then if it finds L underscore, we're going to change that for R underscore. We want to make sure that it's got the L afterwards, so that it doesn't see something with an L in it and then it replaces that, so you might have weird words cropping up. We want to make sure that it only sees the L underscore and replaces it with an R underscore. Cool. So we'll click apply, and there. So you can see there that my leg's been mirrored over perfectly in the correct orientation. And then in our outliner, we've got all our joints in place, with R being the prefix for everything. So we know this is left, this is right, and that's lovely stuff. So at this stage I want to just highlight something. I know we've gone through it in class again, but remember the flow of joints. Everything has to come from a point and kind of go out like a spider's web from the center. So you need to imagine that it comes out from the center of the hips, which we'll be adding in next. It comes out from the center of the hips and then goes to the hips and then down to the toes, and then it goes up the spine and then out to the clavicle and then out to the tips of the fingers. It should never go into the center of the body. It should only ever go out to the appendages. Top of the head, tip of the toes, tips of the fingers. If you were putting in a jaw, or if you had a tail, again the same thing. It'd want to go down that line to the end of that. You don't want to come back into the rig.